Recording in progress.
Hello and welcome to all of you. Welcome to Diversity That Works, preparing students for graduate school. I have very colorful flyers here. This workshop, or workshops, going to be a conversation. We'll be talking about how to prepare undergraduates to be successful applicants to graduate school, and also talking about how you can get a more diverse applicant pool for your program. This workshop is one of 3 that we'll be putting on this quarter, which is why I have copies of this flyer. And to those of you who are joining us via Zoom, we'll email a copy of this flyer to you so you can learn about the other 2 workshops we have coming up in May about admissions, rubrics, and graduate education for the 21st century. Sounds as grand as it actually is going to be. So these workshops are programs of AMIGA, the Alliance for Multi-Campus Inclusive Graduate Admissions, which is a grant-funded collaboration between UCLA and Davis and USC that is nearing the end of its tenure. It's been a 5-year program designed to catalyze reflection around admissions processes, designed to move move humanities departments, towards more holistic practices. So at each campus, representatives from different departments have joined together in conversation with each other and with faculty, including their faculty colleagues, to reflect on our admissions processes and try to instigate change. So the few departments that we have at UCLA, hello and welcome, thank you for joining us. There's been linguistics, NELC, gesturing towards Kara because she's in NELC, I will introduce you properly in a second, and history, classics, anthropology, English, and comparative literature. So faculty from those departments have been convening over the past few years to discuss, and now we are trying to catalyze conversation, a broader conversation across the humanities, hence these workshops. So these workshops, again, I'm calling them workshops, but really we want them to be a conversation about preparing our undergraduates to be better applicants to graduate school. So joining me this afternoon, I am Muriel McClendon. I am Professor of English and Chicago Studies. I'm Associate Graduate Dean as well, and I am the campus lead on the AMIGA grants at UCLA. Joining me are 2 of my fabulous AMIGA colleagues. Finally, Professor Kara Cooney, who is Professor of Egyptian Art and Archaeology and Chair of NELC, Near Eastern Languages and Culture. She's a dynamic, very publicly engaged scholar, the host of a podcast. I don't have time to tell you all of the things that Kara does because we only have an hour and we started late. So Google Kara Cooney for the full introduction. I also do not have time to document the awesomeness of Muriel McClendon, Professor of History and runner of many, many programs. And as I always joke with Muriel, she's everywhere I want to be. Every community there is Muriel. And Muriel, it is true, as also director of the MLMA's undergraduate fellowship program here at UCLA, which we'll be learning about this morning. So we are, even though I've just talked for a long time, our goal is to keep the talky part minimal. We're going to have both of these faculty speak for just a few minutes to seed some conversation. And then we will just open it up to Q&A and have a conversation. There is food coming. This is the first week that we've been able to have food at on-campus meetings, so it's super exciting. And of course, it's late because the place we ordered from did not have drivers available in the window we wanted our food. So it will be here. Staff will let us know when it arrives. I encourage you all to get it. So we'll hear from Kara first and then Muriel.
Okay. My name is Kara Cooney. I'm chair of the Near Eastern Languages and Cultures Department, and it has been an important part of the last 5-6 years of my time at UCLA to work to create more diversity within my field, Egyptology, which is inherently colonialist, inherently racist. It is founded on the premise that Egypt is part of a Mediterranean world rather than an African world. And these issues are all still very hot. They're hot within a growing Egyptian nationalism. They're hot within the United States as we see people of African origin gravitate towards Egyptian study and then consider themselves unwelcome in the field. The field is majority white and it is majority women now. So it's one of those things that you see in diversity, attention to diversity, particularly in the humanities, that you hire the women and then you're done and you don't have to do any more work. When I think we all know here in the humanities that as the humanities is carpet bomb from the inside, then that's when they let the chicks in. And so that's when we, you know, we're actually part of or leading the field when there's nothing left to lead or something, whatever. But okay, so there's a lot that I can talk about there, but that's my main interest. And just briefly, I've started a pipeline program. It's a summer training and then ongoing mentorship program with an HBCU with Howard and with a colleague at Howard, Mario Beatty. And that grant went through UCOP and we won that and we're gonna run it this summer. And I've worked on getting more grad students, separate from this pipeline, getting more grad students of color and underrepresented minorities into the program in my area in particular, but as NELC chair, as part of the admissions committee to work towards diversifying our ranks of graduate students. So I'll stop there and let you know.
I'm really glad to be here, even though I'm in history and the social science, we really belong in the humanities. I always say that.
We welcome you.
Thank you. Every place else we're in the humanities. I don't know how we ended up in social sciences here. Well, so one of the things that I do here is to co-direct the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship. And for the uninitiated, that is the Mellon Foundation's what they call their signature diversity program, whose goal is to diversify faculty in higher ed by focusing on undergraduates. And so this program, this isn't a program, it's in about 50 campuses in this country and 3 in South Africa to find talented, underrepresented students who want to pursue PhDs in the humanities and what Mellon calls humanistic social sciences. And pair them up with faculty mentors. It's a 2-year program and they are mentored. They do significant research projects. They are mentored through the application to graduate school. And Mellon has invested an enormous amount in this program. Students who actually go on to graduate school are eligible for a vast array of resources and support, conferences, symposia, fellowships that they can apply for. And this support continues all the way through the time someone gets tenure. And so as I said, Mellon has really, really put an enormous amount of resources in this. UCLA entered this program in 2000, I should say, was invited to join the program in 2008. And we are one of the most successful programs now. We have one of the highest throughput rates into PhD programs. And so sort of all humanities fields are eligible for students to apply. So I'm asking all of you and all of you out there on Zoom, if you have students, please tell them about this. I'm happy to talk to you about this. This is run out of the Undergraduate Research Center. Whitney Arnold, the director of the Undergraduate Research Center, is the co-director. We would be thrilled to talk to you about this. But the centerpiece of this program is the relationship between an undergraduate and a faculty mentor. And I have to say that Marissa is one of our OG faculty mentors, and we're gonna have to put her on payroll soon. She's mentored so many of our students. So I'm gonna stop there. And I'm happy to talk more about this because it's a fantastic program.
Thank you. So the way we described this, this conversation on the flyer was about how we all share this goal of wanting to diversify our graduate student cohorts, the ultimate goal of diversifying the professoriate. But there are obstacles to that, some of which are more easily surmounted than others. And the one in particular that we highlighted on the flyer was what you do when your applicants, the kinds of people that you want to welcome into your fields, are not as prepared as you really do need them to be. And of course, we all know there's shades of gray in there's a slippery slope from actually not prepared to racism. So there's kind of problem number one, how do you sort of define not prepared, and then what do you do, and what can faculty do? So that's the thrust of the conversation. A couple of things, Kara, you mentioned your pipeline program, Muriel, you talked about Mellon Mays. So let me maybe just invite you both to talk first about what lack of preparedness sort of looks like in your field and how that spurred you to action.
I'll start. for Egyptian studies or for ancient Near East and antiquity studies in general, it's language prep. And I think we've talked about this as a group, that language prep is essential, and that's the biggest gatekeeping opportunity for people that don't want underrepresented people in, is to say, well, you don't have enough years of language X and language Y, and those languages are, of course, the research languages, the modern languages, whatever those are, and then the ancient languages in addition. And to get those languages, it takes years. We all know this. So you don't just come up to speed after a one-year post-bac. And a 2-year master's will help considerably. But it's also better to intervene and become a part of a student's life in the undergraduate years when they're really becoming interested in these things. Because if you're going to do your French or German or Arabic, it's better to start those things as a junior or senior rather than any other time, right? So that's the biggest thing in my field. There's also the idea of the elitist stigma of what school you're coming from. So if you have a student coming from a state school, community colleges before that, they might be considered less desirable because they're not coming from one of these top ranked schools. And of course, in my field, the only places that would prepare an undergraduate, most of them, not completely no, but most of them are the Browns and the Hopkinses of the world. And so you're taking from a pool of elite students and pulling them to an elite PhD, and that's a problem. So how do you then find places? And just to give a short answer to that last problem, then I'll hand it over to Muriel, is that I've made really good informal partnerships with the University of Memphis and Indiana University, both public universities, both low cost to the student, and I've added on Missouri State to this because I have colleagues at each of these places, and they've grown undergraduate and graduate programs. And then I am in touch with them and asking about who their crop is, who's coming out, what's going on, and I'm able to pull more candidates from those places who are underrepresented than by looking only at the elite schools. So some of it is just informal connections with colleagues.
The informal,
Yeah.
to be informal, wasn't it?
Yes, it's so true. We have to build our own counter informality.
I like that. Sounds legit when you say it that way.
Soft.
I would say that language prep is also an issue of underpreparedness in my own discipline in history, and what we also find in the middle major group. Also, something that we focus on is writing, because of course, if you're going to go do a PhD program, you need to be a good writer. So I think those are things that can keep students out of a high quality PhD program. Of course, the LMAs on campus is designed in some way. We're not designed so much around language, but students who need language would have support to study language, and we do work on writing. And in fact, the UCLA program, LMAs program, runs a summer program only for other LMA students that is focused on writing and research. So I think those are two very important things. I think the other thing about LMAs is that it's early intervention, and I think that is really that's critical, because all of these things, you can work with all of these issues if you intervene early enough.
Yeah.
I know we've all spoken to seniors who said, oh, I want to get a PhD in something. Well, how was your German? How was your, I don't even know what languages you study. How's that? Oh, I don't have it. Well, then when you tell them what they might need to do in order to get up to speed, it's really overwhelming. So I think, early intervention, no matter what we talk about that, if you're at the early intervention, talk to students when they are early in their years, to get them thinking about language study, to have them look at their writing and see what their writing is like, and if they need help with that, there are courses here in everything, in language and all of that. So I think early intervention would really help combat the problem of underpreparedness.
Can I jump in really fast, because it's an interesting thing that you can mentor here, and we teach undergraduates. I find myself teaching more graduate study than I do undergraduate, and I end up reaching out to these colleagues because I need other people to do that mentoring for me, because I'm not in the trenches in the undergraduate classroom with upper div students as much as my colleagues are. So I'm actually not working with UCLA students. I'm bringing in students from outside who are working with mentors that are creating excitement in classrooms elsewhere. So there are all different ways of going about this, but it depends on where you find your focus and your sweet spot. So,
Yeah, wherever is good.
Yeah, that's good. So I mean, I have lots of questions that I prepared to ask you, and everything makes sense for questions, but we really want this to be a conversation. And for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, which is over there physically in our room, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We have somebody monitoring the chat, and Chris just yelled at us with his questions in here. So I'll pause for a second and give our audience a chance to ask a question if you have one. Otherwise, I'll go all day with these two.
Maybe we should just introduce ourselves, although we've signed up, but three of us are from plastics. And Linda Spielberg works with our post-bac program. I'm the advisor for it, and Sarah Beckman is a member of the Graduate Affairs Committee, so we're involved in several levels of these kinds of things. And in fact, Sarah and I are also in archaeology, which spans the social sciences, and in fact, we recruited an LMA student this year for admission, Gabriel Silva Collins, and we're hoping very much that he comes, but there's competition to the end. So I'll just want to figure we need to introduce ourselves so you know who we are. Gina probably.
Yeah, so Gina Thomas, I'm in milk. So Kara, I guess the one non-classic member in the audience.
But we all struggle with the need for ancient and modern languages.
It's something I've spoken with colleagues of mine, so colleagues at Western Washington, and also, universities that they're there as, seriologists, which is my field, but not in a seriology program, but they have students who become very interested in this, but their own teaching load doesn't allow them to regularly offer Akkadian, which is the principal language that, and how we rectify this, and what sort of workarounds can there be for students who are deeply interested at these, R2s or other state universities in the ancient Near East, but don't have a place where they can take Akkadian. And there's really no way to do that language unless you are lucky enough, or, lucky is maybe not the word we want, in the position to end up at basically a place that has this as a PhD program, which is an incredibly small field and a contracting field. I can think of several places that are not replacing their Assyriologists, which means they are no longer offering that language.
So a question, right? Like,
Yeah,
how does
question.
one person?
Just, yeah, so that was more sort of a dire comment than a question, but
I was trying to turn it into a question.
Oh. But this question, how do you provide an opportunity for students to acquire this language proficiency in a way that's, I suppose, seen as accredited? I've spoken with Stephen Garfinkel at Western Washington, and he's been providing and sort of shepherding this independent study group in Acadia the students are doing. But how does that stack up when you're applying to Yale or Hopkins or UCLA? And what you can say about your Akkadian level is, a professor kind of sometimes sits in on a study group that we all do on our own.
And yeah, if it doesn't have a transcript, and it's also an overload for the instructors probably, because it's not part of their teaching load.
If I can piggyback on that, one thing I was thinking when we were talking about early intervention, I find in classics I teach like this big Roman art and archaeology TE, and you get a lot of students who are interested, but they're doing it as a G, they just have turned on in this. You tell them to go forward, then they become interested, and at the end of their junior year, you tell them what this will take. And so even if it's not that a language isn't offered, it's like, how do I tell them you now need Latin, Greek, French, and Italian? It's just like, I feel like that's a kind of issue. So like, the languages.
And also, I mean, we do offer them in the summer, but it's very expensive. It's $3,500 to take a year of Greek.
I think that's the other question.
Yeah.
Is the
Where it's not only minus a summer job.
but also so where can the money come from to provide? Because so like that sounds like the Melanaise program is really great. And so I suppose we need to be looking for more kinds of things that even for students who aren't yet on that trajectory, who can get money to do doing a summer study course to kind of find out if they want to go forward.
And that's the program that you have, Kara,
Yeah.
for the summer.
And the summer study course, Yeah, it's from UCOP and it focuses on writing and language. So it's a boot camp in Middle Egyptian, it's an introduction to the Egyptian language, and the students coming in are sophomores and juniors. And
it's funded for them, right?
and it's completely
Is that
funded.
even for UCLA students too?
No, they're from
Right,
outside.
yeah,
So it's a
right.
tour
It's an
from-
HBCU.
Right, yeah.
Tour
Yeah,
from
also
Howard,
HBCU thing.
tour from Howard, tour from other HBCUs. But it's listed on our courses for this summer. And I've been then telling people from Cal States, from other universities, sending it out to professors who wants to be in this course, because half of it will be language instruction and half of it, maybe not half, maybe it'll be like a 70-30, will be writing your research project. So you will have a submission or writing sample for your application to come, right? And that means that 4 of them are fully funded. But then if other people want to come in and then write to me and say, oh, I'm from Cal State San Bernardino and I would love to do this course because they have Egyptian there, I could potentially look into getting funding for this as chair, because I can do that for summer courses because I pull those purse strings. That's where you need this synergy to come in, but to be able to run something where you have independence in the summer, where the department can make some calls. And if I can throw $3,000-4,000 at a particular student and maybe ask the division to give more for students who can't afford it, that would be ideal, because it's usually about $5,000 to take an intensive summer language course. So we're only getting 4 students funded, 4. So it's a very small number, and those students are staying for 8 weeks, and they'll be doing all kinds of other field trips and other things. We'll be going to Getty, we'll go to Huntington, we'll go to all these different places, right? And that's great, but I would like to create local opportunities in addition for students that don't need to stay in the dorms, and it won't be as expensive, so.
And this, just to make sure that this is recorded in perpetuity, this is the UCOP's HBCU program. This is a UC-wide thing to fund partnerships between UC faculty and HBCU and historically Black colleges and universities faculty, and there's a corresponding one for HSS. That's good. And I, as associate dean, all the UCLA applications went through my office, so I had the letters of support, and I can tell you that we got 0 in this cycle, 0 applications from the humanities that all came from the sciences. So that's then if you're there, it's something, but this idea of developing programming, it's one thing for you to do that. It's another thing, like Sarah, you're all assistants, professors, right? So don't do this, right? Or it's work that must be done, right? But then a couple of things. Like, one, this isn't going to get you tenure, right? So you definitely should not be putting your energy here. But then where to put your energy and how to inspire associate and full professors to actually take on this labor, and what else can we do apart from programming, right? Or time and money, not an issue. Of course, there are things that we could all do and collaborate. UCOP has the funding for it, so that's something to think about. But then, what else? What else?
And does it also fund speaking of time, your time teaching and mentoring in the summer? Not really.
It
And you have to
can.
give up-
I'm doing it for free.
But you can't. You write the
But
grant.
it's also, it means
You're doing it for free because you're
Right, but
you.
summer's a very difficult time, when students come to the Mel Mays program, we've had to make a big point telling you're not going to have a faculty mentor, because, that's what they sort of all want and expect sort of initially, and we say, well, the summer, North Campus faculty, we go to our labs, and our labs may be halfway across the world, and so most faculty are not around, so summer is difficult for many reasons. Even we said, the faculty are here, they're home in their offices, writing or doing something, they're not necessarily a family, something, and so that is.
So then there's like another existential question that raises is, okay, so we all say we want to cultivate a more diverse applicant pool, we want to diversify our cohorts, but do we really, or do we want somebody else to do it? Do we want Kara to do it for us?
I think we can each do something. It doesn't necessarily mean that each of us has to give up an entire summer long, but we can talk to individual students. We absolutely can. And Sarah, when you were saying, oh, you talk to these students, I think, if we all do that, and maybe to the extent, again, this is more and more of our time, keep in touch with those people who show interest, and so they don't come to at the end of their junior year saying, I want to apply to graduate school, when then you have to say, well, where are your four languages. I mean, it's not easy, it's not perfect, but.
I see your kind of idea, but just before I lose this thought, because that's gonna happen, that one of the things that we talked a lot about in Amiga and hope to make resources available, we will make resources available to the whole campus, is how you can put these things on your websites, on your departmental websites, right? And I know you put your thing on your model to us all, but you know, departments can have a page like, so you want to be an Egyptologist, right? So you want to go to grad school in history, this is what you need to do, right? And so that's the kind of work that an individual faculty person can do without thinking about like, oh my God, I'm gonna apply for this giant grant and I also have to write about the tenure and all these things, right? So that's the kind of change, or like a local.
I would also like to advocate, I mean, this would be outside of UCLA, but for fact that when you're out giving a talk or something, ask to spend 10 minutes with undergraduates who are interested in graduate school. My department does not yet have any promotional material, but does have to leave your card. If you have promotional material, staple your card to it, let them get in touch with you. I mean, I think just where 10 minutes out of your life when you're at another institution, I think everybody can do that, and that will benefit the entire enterprise. It will benefit all of us.
So, yeah, I wanted to bring another factor, which I'm very much aware of, it happened since I started teaching kids, and that is the families of these students. I learned this while teaching at Yale. I had a student from Southern California, an Asian American student. She said, you don't know what it's like growing up in Southern California. You have to be an engineer. You have to be, our students are afraid to tell their parents that they're going to major in classics or Greek, and maybe Egypt's the same thing.
No, straight up.
Especially
Exactly
for first gen. If you've gotten to college for the first time, you're the first generation in your family, they want you to be successful and become a lawyer or a doctor, an engineer, or at least a physician's assistant, or, but you're in Greece, Egypt,
It's remind me of your name.
Sarah, I'm
Sarah.
also Sarah.
So Sarah, so that please come to our conversation on May 25th, Graduate Education for the 21st Century, because that's exactly the set of questions that we want to take up, right? Like, how do you articulate the use value of administrative humanity? But what is the use value, and then how does that trickle down to how we're engaging with our undergrads? So yes, it's such a crucial
And
point.
I'm not sure how to address that. I think part of the outreach program that the Charlie Steinmetz, who was down the chair that I have, he said it's the parents that are important. I learned this from him. He organizes, pays for buses to take inner city kids, but make sure it's when the parents can come too. And we changed our outreach program to Saturdays so working parents could come, so that they at least can share in some of the excitement and interest that students may have in Egypt or Greece or something. Because that is that they're afraid to tell their parents.
So yes, but I want to bracket that because
In humanities,
so we're gonna address that at the end of May. And so today, like, we've done all that work. So we've got these students, right? And they really want to be an Egyptologist. So, but there's like barriers, right? And how do we overcome those? And that's what I'm hoping we can generate together, right? Resources on your website, distribute cards, one-on-one conversations, material, what else can you do? Like, even if you're reaching the students, right? Then, well, I also wanted to segue to like your gatekeeping colleagues, but so I should say that
I was saying just in terms of reaching your student, I've been done this for a while, but I took a bunch of students out to coffee once, and just to chat with them. And one thing that really surprised me, they wanted to know what professors do. They were really excited to learn what we do when we're not standing up in front of the classroom, and that's another way.
sitting around talking about that.
That's right.
Without lunch.
Right, exactly. But anything like that. I mean, I used to invite some, why don't I do this anymore? Invite you to my big survey to come have lunch with me, because you gotta eat lunch anyway, right? And so I mean, that's a way, I mean, and I love that. And that's a way to get to know students, and for students to get to know you and sort of what you do and ask questions. That's another way at least to get them into, and there you might be able to talk about, the languages that you have to learn to go to grade school, but it get them thinking about it.
I do a lot of phone calls and Zooms with students, and I fit them in as I can. And the earlier you can get to them, the better. A 20-minute, 30-minute phone call can be huge, and then they come back to a year later and then 2 years later, and their experience has grown because they've gone and done what you've said. And then they come back and they're like, oh, I've done this year of French, and oh, I've done this, and I found a way to do Egyptian here or there. I mean, the other thing that one can do is go back to the way things used to be done. When I started Egyptology at Johns Hopkins, I didn't have any Egyptian. I had French, I had German, yay me. But I didn't have any Egyptian. I started it there in my first year of graduate school.
Yeah.
We don't allow that anymore. We make it pay to play. And we see who has the master's first, and then we're not gonna invest all of this money in this person unless we know they're really serious. To invest in diversity students, I think you often have to take a risk. And if the student has some of what you need, but not all of what you need, you may have to say this person is not going to be on time to degree in the way that other students will be on time to degree. We should build that in at this place, at UCLA, into, not just with pipeline programs, not necessarily just with postbacks. There's gotta be another way to build in that kind of prep.
If I found it to really second this, and we've been working in our department about this, and we're pioneering a new kind of first quarter courses for incoming graduate students to try to help them build their languages. But this is something that, like, as the university, there are these two pressures going in opposite directions. On the one hand, the university administrations to decrease time to degree and to move people more quickly, and a larger pool of students who actually, as Kara said, need more time. Because it, you know, they will need two more years at the beginning to really, you know, either learn a language from the start or get a language that they've already got some knowledge of to the point where they can read it and work with it.
Right, because they didn't get to take Latin in high school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I was just seconding very much both of these. I can think, and it's a shift that I think has been fairly, I've gotten to when I got into my PhD program at Michigan, I had moved from East Asian studies. I had no Assyrian, I had no Akkadian, Sumerian, and I did that all during my degree. And I'm painfully aware, because my colleague at the University of Michigan now has used the example of me to try and get similar students accepted, and it's no longer seen as viable. And I mean, anecdotally, I know anecdotes are not data, but when I think about the reasons why students don't complete a graduate program, I can think of a single time it has been because of a lack of proper preparation. There's always a constellation of reasons, but that you didn't come in with Akkadian or Sumerian, or that one of your bevy of Egyptian languages is never been one of them. But it's just seen as these students are too much of a risk.
I'm glad that this is coming up because it gives me a chance to plug the next conversation that we're having is on May 4th, and it's about, it has the very unsexy title of admissions rubrics, but really will be a conversation about, well, rubrics, either, you know, material or abstract, like how do you determine as a department collectively, how you determine what really is going to ensure success for your graduate students, what are you really looking for, and how you systematize that.
So getting into the admissions committee
Yeah.
action and how things work.
Yes, because even as you were talking, like, okay, you were saying you need all these languages, and I was like, well, if we are aware, and this is especially for all of you, if you're aware that those are gatekeeping mechanisms, then why not just change them?
Yeah. That conversation has come up in our field, and Princeton has abandoned requirements for their undergraduates, right?
Well, no,
For classical civ.
right, but which
Not
not,
for graduate.
but I mean, our class, this is a separate issue with our classical civilization major requires 1 year of one language. And we still require that. We've had conversations about how useful that is to students versus just an extra hurdle. But of course, that's nowhere near the amount of preparation that you need for graduate school. And so students who, you know, put it off until their senior year or do it and then think, oh, thank God I'm done. I don't have to take another Latin class, and then realize, oh, I want to go on. They've got this major that I think sometimes feel a little betrayed, like, well, I didn't realize that I couldn't go on with this in the way that I thought.
Well, this is where the bridge programs come in.
Well, and
That's
also
the summer
your
program
website
that Kara,
does it,
you
you
know,
Well, and the conversations that we try to have with them.
Right.
To explain.
But you can only talk to one student at a time, maybe 5, right? So you just have that on your website. If you want to go on, you need to do these things. I feel like I cut you off.
Can
we did a work,
I was gonna say, we did a workshop last spring, like, so you wanna go to graduate school of classics, there's classical philology, there's archaeology, there's history, how do these fields relate, what do you need for each? But and I don't know which of the workshops this comes up in, I feel I'm always very hesitant to encourage, not hesitant to encourage people, but I mean, look at the job market out there, look at the
Yes,
chances,
there's
like,
always
oh,
a
I
huge
invest,
push.
this is the most promising student, like, do I want them to go into classical archaeology, or do I want them to make sure they're taken care of in whatever career they want to? I feel very like, what do I do with those feelings?
That on May 25th, I mean, we can, or before then, I'm always happy to talk about this, right? Like why does one need, or why should one pursue advanced training? Why? If we are limiting ourselves to thinking like, oh, you go to graduate school because you want to be a professor, like great, that should be your a priori reason, like do that, but then also, you know, be aware, and we should all be aware and find ways to cultivate this awareness, that there's any number of things, we all know that there's any number of things that we can do, and we have to make room for that.
And I agree with that, but when it comes from a professor telling you that, like, hey, I'm a professor, but you go find one of those other.
No, you say like,
That's
I'm
the
a
hard part,
professor.
in plastics in particular.
But you can say, and you know, this is what I say, and I was, you know, director of career development in this department, and I will say like, look, I know from day one, come in, you want to be a professor, good for you. Like I and this department are going to do every single thing we can to get you to the finish line, absolutely prepared to do that, and we will help you. But we also want you to know that a lot of stuff is going to happen to you, right? Between your first day and when you get that degree, and who knows where you're going to be.
So we're trying to do this at the moment when the investment in the graduate student is sky high. When I started in 1994, I got a stipend of $4,000, I remember, and I upped it to $5,000, and I was like, yes, now with a job I can make it in Baltimore. Crazy. And yes, I had full tuition. Okay, great. But like what we pay now versus then is considerably different. And with the job market wasn't great then, but my God, you know, with the way that we de-tenured the teaching in higher ed. So what we're trying to do with, we can talk about language obstacles all we want, but the actual late capitalist obstacles are pretty enormous, and that's something also.
Yes, it's also important to think about how this whole the umbrella idea here with Anita and these workshops is diversifying the professoriate, right? Or diversifying our cohorts to really push us, all of us in our fields as humanists, to, you know, challenge us to think differently about what it means to be a professional humanist, but also like go change the world, right? We cannot keep replicating ourselves because there are fewer and fewer spots for us. We're always going to need us, but we're going to need other things too. And that's why we need different people.
I just have to put in a plug for Mel and Mays here. Students who have been Mel and Mays fellows do better on the academic job market than the average bear. They have they are in tenure track and other academic in higher proportions to the general population. I'm just saying.
That is actually, that's even beyond Mel and Mays, that is statistically proven. I have these stats.
Can I point out that I'm super ashamed that before I met Muriel, I didn't know that Mel and Mays existed, and that it's this program. It seems to do so many things. I know Whitney Arnold. I worked as one of the people in the undergraduate research.
Well, come on down, girl.
The fact that I didn't know about it means that most of my faculty don't know about
Well,
it.
we're family find out about is from students, because we actually advertise to students, because then they go and try and get a faculty mentor. But you know, we'd be thrilled to come and talk to you and your department. Absolutely.
You can also talk about them with their scholars.
Oh,
That's another undergraduate
That's true.
mentorship that is meant to, that actually helps with tuition, and for students, undergraduates who are intending to go to graduate school. So
That's true.
And we've also never nominated one. And
And that's a larger cohort. The McNair cohort, I believe, is 14, Mel Mays is 5. So.
Here, what,
Big
oh, the
fan.
number
I think there are 14 McNair scholars and 5 Mel Mays fellows.
on campus?
Yeah, and I think at every campus, that's the number for each campus.
Oh, okay.
5 per year.
Kara, question for you. Do other departments have the program like we have in NELC, the Departmental Scholars Program?
Yes.
Because this, I know it requires sort of a student knowing early that this is what they want to do, but to be able to fold in an MA, and if the student is coming in, the Departmental Scholar we have.
Departmental Scholars is available.
Yeah, any
division-wide and
department.
university-wide, right?
We've also
Yeah.
never had one that I know. I think maybe.
You haven't had one at Proficiency?
And I keep asking, somebody says, oh, it's not available for all departments, but it's obviously something I've talked to our undergraduates about.
It is available. You have the capacity as a department to
And it's
to
funded
take it.
also, it's funded.
It's I could not tell you, I don't think there's funding attached to it. It's just the department has to make the effort to build the curriculum for the student.
You
but-
just fold the student into your graduate courses.
Yeah,
essentially.
and they
I've
get
done a number of departmental scholars, some successful, some very much not successful.
And we have no right, but Mary could have been one though.
they
and
just,
that's
they
what-
continue their undergrad, they continue to be enrolled for an extra year and then graduate.
So they are paying an
Yeah.
extra year for themselves. Yeah.
Let me, I'm gonna, sort of rein the conversation in again, I mean, unless you guys have questions,
I have a
sorry.
few more questions.
Go
But
for it.
they're related to kind of, and I don't know if this, one is about like, if we are if we're recruiting diverse cohorts and people coming in at different levels, do any of you within your departments have strategies for making those cohorts kind of work together and like, because we've sort of had some problems with people are at different levels, how do they gel together to build the cohort they need to survive?
Yeah.
And then I had another question on just like, to your point, where I said that their careers outside the professoriate, that we should have people have either any of your departments done like a good job maintaining connections with those who have left UCLA with PhD, they're outside of academia, they come back and speak, they kind of, because I think especially within classics, but I assume this is a lot of other degrees, there's this kind of like, you come in as a graduate, you drink the Kool-Aid, you maybe wanted to be a professor, but now you really want to be a professor, and you don't want to leave because it means you can't do it, like how have departments push back against that? Because that is what I really think we need in classics.
I mean,
I don't know if there are thoughts on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of keeping in touch with alumni, I think two things have happened in my department. Our Graduate Student Association was in the before times, I don't know what's going on now. They would have an annual career networking night, and they would invite people back who did all kinds of things to talk about what they did. I've run professional development workshops in the before times in my department, and I also would invite people to come back and talk about what they did. So graduate students had an opportunity to to find out all that. And people, of course, people who come back are happy in their career. So it's really nice that people come and say, I'm in university administration. We've had a number of people who teach in independent schools who are really, really happy. People teaching community colleges who are really happy. So they can see that there are a variety of career options. My department was part of a pilot project with the American Historical Association and Mellon Foundation, was supposed to be about career diversity. That did not go entirely well, but the effort is made, and so people are kind of talking. Well, people will talk about it for them, but not necessarily. If you're out there, don't say anything. So I mean, it is something to talk about, and I think there are efforts being made. And again, all you do is invite some alums back, so it doesn't have to be really complicated.
My first grad student, Eric Wells, is now a CAO of. Everyone knows Eric, because he was in this academic senate for so many years, and he's the first PhD student I finished, and we are in contact all the time because he's here, and students can see that there is something else besides the professoriate for them in the future. And many of our students go into university administrative tracks. And I have one student right now who's very interested in an NGO in the Middle East sort of track, and I'm training him in that direction. So those things definitely happen. Public service, State Department, those kinds of things happen a lot in the now field. So that works. And then your first question about how to train a cohort at many different levels, we do this all the time. I hadn't been asked this question directly. It's really interesting to think about. But essentially, because we have so much crossover within NELP, we have 11 different subspecialties when you count from Armenian to Turkish to it's insane how many different subspecialties you have. There's a lot of crossover. So in my seminars, I'll have students from Hebrew Bible and Near Eastern archaeology coming into my course who don't know anything about Egypt. We know they don't know anything. And the first years the Egyptian first years thus feel more comfortable because they're not the only ones who are there like terrified because they don't know anything. And I'll reach out and say, okay, does anyone want to explain this for the Hebrew Bible folks or for somebody else or for the first year? Somebody explain this weird political thing we just talked about, with Yale or I don't know, whatever. Explain this to the first years and someone will explain it. And as far as language is concerned, when we're reading texts, I encourage sight reading and I'm like, you're not gonna get as good at it first and second year. It's gonna be okay. And the third and fourth years are, they're just able to read really quickly. That's okay, but we're gonna all not suffer through it, never say, yeah, but we're gonna shoot for something. Yes, so we're gonna and I say we'll throw out the words. We're gonna help you with it, and so I do make it a collaborative thing, particularly with the first year. is reading, so that we're not that typical hazing of ancient language reading classes, right? Where we all wait in silence for the student to suffer through and come up with the word, and it's more collaborative. And if it's more collaborative and older students can come in and help, then it works really well for language reading. So there's all kinds of ways to do it.
If I were to extrapolate a widely applicable rule from what you just said, I guess it would be to normalize differential
Yeah.
levels, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody comes to this program from different places, right? Bringing different things to it. So if you can, as a department or a program, make that be the norm and be explicit about it, then I think that's something to.
The number of different specializations helps, right? It's gonna be harder in classics, I imagine, because you have less of that. But
But that idea that you can normalize differentials, not just in the admissions process, but in the classroom itself, so that's an important thing.
Yeah, in history, we have 12 different subfields, so we're right there with you. And now there is a required entering seminar for all grades. So they're all coming from all their different fields, and people just know different things.
Yeah.
And actually, they love this seminar. This has been extremely popular since this was started.
So we have just a few minutes left, and hopefully, I'm very hungry, but just want to keep it real. But also kind of bring it back to the central question that we started with, which is what can faculty do now, right?
the admissions committee question.
Right, or yeah, what can we do now to be diversifying our cohorts? There's big, top level programming, the HBCUs, and HSI programs. There's one-on-one mentoring, right? Reaching out, doing the things that Muriel described. There's putting stuff on your website. There's talking together with your colleagues about why do you require these things and do you need to, and we'll be talking about that before. But then there's the what other things can we do? And also what about cranky pants?
Oh,
Faculty. What about cranky pants? Cranky.
The faculty who want the GRI no matter what,
Yeah.
want the GRE, sorry, no matter what, and in NELC we have that optional. I think it's pretty clear the GRE is a gatekeeping device and works well for certain people and not for others, but some people don't want to let it go, so it's optional, and that's fine. I think the best incentive within NELC is the Coda Robles. And if it weren't for the Coda Robles, I don't think we would have the diverse numbers that we have, because it allows us to take a grad student essentially for free in addition, because we don't have to pay NRST, non-resident tuition. There's all kinds of things that allow us to pull in an extra Coda Robles. I suppose you could then say, well, but what if nobody applies who could actually qualify for the Coda Robles? Then you go back to all of the things that we just talked about, and outreach and connecting with colleagues at non-R1 universities or other places that serve diversity candidates more. But the Coda Robles, if a faculty member knows that they're probably not going to get a graduate student, or that they might get 2 graduate students if they're able to pull in a Coda Robles candidate, then they're going to be they're reading applications now in NELC in a completely different way, because the committee focuses so much on Coda Robles.
No, in history, every year we talk about them, as we're reading files, look out for Coda Robles candidates.
But I do think it begins with the undergraduate level, because
Yeah.
in graduate admissions, we are competing for the same top level diversity candidates, and they get $40,000-$50,000 stipends from Harvard and Princeton and Stanford.
Yeah.
So it's too late, and it's unseemly at that point. We should be identifying them earlier.
Yes.
We have one of the largest, most exciting and talented and most diverse campuses in the country.
Yeah.
That's where the best raw material in the future of all of our professions is. But as I say, it's also a very professionally oriented undergraduate student body. They got in, their parents, oh, you're gonna go to UCLA, you'll get a job, you'll be an engineer. So we have to, it's those gateway courses that Sarah teaches, and all of us are involved in students of those, or you teach the diversity required course. It's sort of converting them in that
So
period.
I'm not saying to not go after those top tier diversity candidates, but I would also look to a tier 2 and have a deep bench, so that when those tier 1 students go to an Ivy League, then you've got somebody in the bench who will need more mentoring and more work potentially, but that student will be grateful and thrilled to come to UCLA rather than seeing it is something less than an East Coast
I
Ivy.
think we get a broad range of grad
But that
applicants from
deep
all
bench
kinds of
has
tiers.
served us well, and it's sometimes the students that are more hungry and they just do it better in a grad program often.
So, yeah, I mean, do you get applicants from Western Washington now as a result of this partnership with something that Kara
We got a lot of those.
Yes,
cycle.
because one of our
Now we're
archaeology
getting a lot more
students, we can talk about one of our archaeology students teaching in that program too, so in that department. And started out as a replacement for Bartwinkle, so we should, but yeah, that kind of thing that, you know, where some of the best students come from, the smaller places, not, I mean, if you get the Ivy League, you probably have been taking Greek and Latin all your life in prep school, and you're sick of it, and you want to do something really exciting like psychology. So it's where the students are coming from, that's also looking out for them as well, but I think some of the best ones, maybe not for our programs, but for the future, the professions and the humanities and diversifying the professorial future, will be among our undergraduates.
I'm glad you said that because it reminds me of a conversation that Muriel we just had where you were talking about faculty pushback against seeing the Mellon Mays program as a pipeline program because these Mellon Mays students are just going to go somewhere else. Right? But then you said something similar to what Sarah just said. We're doing it for the greater good.
Yes, we are.
And presumably some Mellon Mays students to other campuses will come here.
Yeah, they do.
We're right. We have a minute.
I just want to talk some more about the bridge programs. Kara's now launched one in the summers. We have a post-bac program that's modeled on the one at Penn, where both Sarah and Lydia went to graduate school, so they know about that one. And our newly endowed Proficiency chair, our colleague, has just given some of her endowed chair funds for a scholarship for a student to come and study for it's a 1-year certificate program. Of course, they already have to have at least 1 year of Greek and Latin, so it's tricky. But it was advertised fairly late, it might have attracted a different pool. But that is, as I say, the bridge part, a lot of Michigan now has a bridge sort of MA, Cornell, a lot of places,
What about the
now.
funding? Where's the funding come from?
There, in the case of the Proficiency scholars, comes from Captain Morgan's Proficiency chair. So it may not last forever, but it's a great start. We've advertised it widely in our profession and all the media.
But if
there's-
you're an in-resident California, if you're a California resident, then you're gonna pay the normal grad student tuition for a postdoc or?
we do it through UNEX, so we don't need to charge non-resident tuition.
Okay.
It's priced at the cost of a full year of in-state tuition.
Okay.
But still, it's a
That's a lot of
financial
money.
obstacle, and as I say, the summer intensive language courses are the most expensive step really for this. And I just reviewed my former department at Harvard, and they have all this kind of money to throw in. They're funding summer language study, although I noticed all the students coming to learn Greek and Latin were coming from private high schools or elite high schools. I said, why aren't you out there getting different kinds of students? So some of the private universities can finance these programs much more readily than we can.
So maybe in addition to partnering with our colleagues at R2s or the Western Washingtons, we should.
Yeah, call
Try to
these
make some-
folks and say, we have students here too, take a look at
Well,
ours.
it's like a shame.
For my colleagues at the elites, they're charging an arm and a leg for masters, for pay to play masters, and so I find the immorality of it highly problematic.
Yeah.
That's
So-
its
but
own
That's
thing.
why we're
Talking
trying to
about
keep this,
program.
that's why we're trying to keep this affordable, but you do run into a conflict because summer courses, as we know, generate revenue.
Right.
You're cutting into your own revenues. And so do certificate programs. So it is a challenge to faculty to develop these in ways that are both fair and equitable, and yet that are also now built into the unfortunate revenue stream that is the University of California. But we should all, follow your example with UCOP as well.
Yeah.
The HBCU. UCUP, HBCU, I forget the exact name of the grant, but I think one lesson I'm internalizing is that better outreach to the humanities departments to encourage those applications.
And we worked with Barbara Van Nostrum to get that to get that written to help with the budget. She was
She's
amazing,
awesome. She's
amazing.
awesome.
And without Barbara, we wouldn't have done it. So you do need someone to hold your hand through the administrative parts of that process. And we do plan to expand it. Potentially, we need buy-in, right? You need people to do the free teaching. I can get $1,000, but you need.
It doesn't have to be free, you write the grants, you do the line items on the budget.
But to Islamic studies and Hebrew Bible, because I think those areas would have great potential to grow within the Black community.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Zoom, for joining us. This was being recorded and will be up on the division's website at some point. We'll let you know so you can tell all your friends. And I have these flyers. Please pick one up and find out what's happening next. And I heard the food came.